Well, welcome back, folks. Today's episode is going to be about the chrome for the Suzuki TS50 restoration project. The chrome that I'm going to have re-chromed by a chrome shop. That's what you see in the shot right now. And I think I've got it pretty well organized. I'll go through my inventory of parts one last time before I request a quote, but I think this is generally what I'm going to have redone. And we'll go through this in a little more detail in a minute. Sharp-eyed viewers might note there are a few pieces missing, namely the rims. As I've talked about, I think before, getting motorcycle rims re-chromed is very expensive. Last time I had rims redone, re-chromed, it was around $250 US dollars. That's each. So to have the two rims for this bike re-chromed to be at least $500. And in fact, with the way prices have been going the last few years, especially in the last year or two since the whole COVID epidemic thing, I can see where easily I might pay $275, $300, or maybe even more per rim. And I can still buy new rims for this bike from Suzuki, and I think they're around $80 each, $80 to $100 each. Bottom line is I can buy two new rims, OEM, with spokes, complete, for less than having one of the original rims re-chromed. So I'm going to buy new rims, and the spokes go with it. That's why you don't see the rims in this shot. There's a couple other components. That is the headlight shell, or rather, I'm sorry, the headlight ring. This is the headlight shell right here. The headlight ring and the rear shocks. And we're going to talk about those separately in a moment. Right now I want to just take you through some of these pieces briefly. And some of these you've seen before. Here we have the shield or guard for the exhaust system. I pretty much have straightened that out, I think, and got that about where it needs to be. The headlight shell right here did have a crease in it. I don't know if you can see that in the shot right here. It had a crease in it that I worked out. Other than that, it was in pretty good condition. But I worked that crease out, and there's a little touch of a ripple right here that I might do a little bit more work on, but generally that's pretty much where I want it to be. This is the shift lever that we've talked about a number of times, and in fact, if you recall, I talked about the fact there's tool marks on both the back side, which is right here, and then the face side, and I have worked those out, as you can see. Let me put a picture up here briefly of this backside before I started the work on it, so you can see what it looked like before, and then you'll see this this after. So I think I've got that ready for re-chroming. This is now down to bare steel here and here, of course. In fact, most of the chrome is gone from this piece now. There's a little bit of chrome here, I think, in here, and then around the knuckle, or where it fits onto the shaft coming out of the engine. We have headlight ears here with the brackets. Those are straight and in very good condition. I didn't have to do anything with those. Handlebars, these are the original handlebars off the bike, and they are straight, though the chrome, as you can probably see right here, is in pretty bad condition. You see a couple of marks right here, these black markers, or black marks from a marker. That marked the point that there was a dent, I guess you would call it, or a bend, more appropriately probably, that went something like this here. It was a V-shaped like that, and what I ended up doing, the marks I just left on there from where I put it in the press, my 20-ton press, and straightened it out. I don't know how well you can see that on video, but I did get it nice and straight. So the handlebars will get redone, and then the forks. Now there's two pieces to actually there's three, but there's two we're going to talk about right now. And that is the lower tubes right here are chrome, so I'll have to get those done, as well as these well, Suzuki calls them, I think, a nut or an outer tube. think they're an auto tube actually, which is threaded onto this section. The inner tube for the slider right here, and I just have them covered with plastic right now because I didn't want them dribbling oil out all over the place. They have been drained, of course, but there's always residual oil that remains inside of these tubes. So that's why they're plastic bags. That's the only reason right now. But I have to get these two pieces apart so that I can get the seal. The seals are in here. Remove the seal so that I can send these two pieces out, two for each fork, to have them re-chromed. So in a few minutes, we're going to reposition, and I'm going to show the separation of these two pieces. That's why you see the black duct tape right here wrapped around that particular piece, because we're going to be putting it in a vise, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But before we get to doing a little brief video on separating these two pieces and how I'm going to go about that, let me talk about the shocks and the headlight rim briefly. These are the components that I'm going to not re-chrome the originals. We have the headlight rim. I haven't taken the headlight apart yet, but what we're talking about is the rim itself. These NOS rims are readily available. They're all over the place out on eBay. So what I did is I went out here, and let me see right there, and I found an NOS rim. That is the original, right there, Suzuki part number you can see. Brand new rim still in the package. And I'm going to use that instead of re-chroming the original. Now the original isn't terribly bad, but it isn't up to a restoration. It'd be perfectly fine for a rider or even a reconditioning, but for a restoration it's a little bit too rough for my taste. I have not tested the bulb yet of the headlight. I don't know if the bulb works or not, or the headlamp, excuse me, actually works. Now, the reason I went this route is cost. I bought this NOS part on eBay, and I think I paid around $30 US for that part. To have this original re-chromed will easily be $75, if not even more now. I think 10 years ago I might have paid $25 to have that re-chromed. Today, I'm thinking $75 to $100 US, so you can see from just a pure economics perspective, it made sense just to go with an NOS part. Now, regarding the rear shocks, these shocks, and let me pick this one up for you. These shocks, the lower section here is chrome, and this is one of the originals, of course, and as you can see, the chrome is in pretty poor shape. And then this I don't know what you call it, this cap is chrome also, and that's not in very good condition. The problem is these shocks don't come apart, so I can't even if I can get them apart, and I had to cut that one apart, and we'll come back to that in a minute, but even if I could get them apart, you can't re-chrome this without destroying the seals inside of the shock here, because this is all one unit. You can see it's been welded. So I had to come up with an alternative. I wanted to preserve the caps right here and have those re-chromed. So what I ended up doing was cutting one of them apart. And I just took it over to my bandsaw and just cut it off, drained the oil out. There was still oil in here. And the reason I did that is I wanted to preserve this. I wanted to get that cap off, because this I want to get re-chromed. I'll have to do the same thing on the other shock here eventually. And the rest of this is going to get thrown away because these aren't any good anymore anyway. They're pretty well wore out. So I needed to get this chrome cap off, and ultimately I found replacement shocks. Now these are not identical. They're a little bit different. They're about the same length as the original. And the diameter here of the spring is about the same. In fact, they are the same for all practical purposes as the original. This is the original spring right here. So the length and everything else is about the same. It's a little bit different here, these adjusters, which the originals don't have. But what I'm going to do, or my plan is, after I get those caps re-chromed, is I'm going to take this shock apart and I'm going to install this over the top of it and then put it back together. That's my thinking. And I have done that before. I think I did that on a TS185. Pretty sure I can get this apart. I just have to compress the spring. I think this just threads off. And then we'll be back in business here in terms of putting it back together. So I'm going to replace the shocks with these aftermarket. I think these cost about $80 US for the pair. I think they're made in Taiwan. And they're the closest shock I could find to matching the originals. So I'm going to have to live with that, I think, at this point. Trying to find good used rear shocks for this bike that are in excellent condition to pristine condition is virtually impossible. Almost all of them you're going to find are wore out, and the chrome is flaking. The paint's poor, like you can see here on these two springs right here. For a rider, for reconditioning, you can probably find something suitable, but certainly not for the restoration level that I'm going for. So that's my plan. Disassemble the new shocks, put that chrome cap back in place, and we're going to have to call it a day for the rear shocks. Now we're going to go over to the bench. We're going to do some more work on on the front shocks and how to get them apart. I want to demonstrate the process that I use to get those apart so that we can get the lowers apart and get that eventually get that seal out of that outer tube or nut, as some vendors or suppliers call it. Over at the bench vise, we have the fork tube clamped up in the vise, and you can see the section here with I've got about 3 wraps of black heavy-duty duct tape wrapped around that piece. That would be this piece right here to protect it from being damaged. And I've just got it clamped securely. Now you don't want to over clamp this. If you tighten it too tight in the vise, you run the potential of deforming that piece and clamping down on the threads, and then you're going to have another problem trying to get it apart. So you want to get it tight enough, but don't reef on the vise too much if you can avoid it. And of course, I've got soft aluminum jaws. These are just homemade aluminum jaws here. I thought I would share with you the different names that the various manufacturers use for this piece. That would be this piece right here. And I just put this little note together. You can see Suzuki, the TS50, this project, they call it an outer nut. Kawasaki in the G5, he uses this same almost identical design. A lot of the manufacturers did at the time. Nut, fork outer tube, and then on the Yamaha YL1, again, same design, called it the tube inner. So it's interesting, Yamaha calls it the tube inner, Suzuki calls it the outer nut. So if you're ever looking for parts, that's the nomenclature commonly you will find used to identify these parts. And in most cases, they're long since no longer available from the original suppliers, new. You might be able to find NOS out on eBay or somewhere, some dealer might have them in their stock, but in terms of new, I'm not generally speaking aware of these being available from the OEM suppliers anymore. In fact, later on, I think they got away from this design. Later on the larger bikes especially, in later years, they went to a completely different style than this. Anyway, let's figure out how to get this apart. Now, this piece is threaded onto this piece, and what most people try to do is they try to hold this lower tube right here in a vise or vice grips or something, and then try to get a grip on this piece and spin it off. It's just threaded on. It's just a standard right hand thread. Sometimes that works. The risk you run is damaging this, because if you put vice grips or a big channel lock or water pump pliers or a big heavy wrench of some kind on here, you will run a real risk of damaging this. And I'm not talking about just damaging the chrome. I mean deforming it or putting deep gouge marks into it that chroming will not cover. So what I usually do is I take an opposite approach, and that is I hold the nut, or the outer tube in this case, as Suzuki calls it, I hold this in a vise and rotate this. And there are several ways you can do that. You can use just a simple wrench. This is a common adjustable, commonly known as crescent wrenches. This happens to be a Craftsman brand. Everyone calls them crescent wrenches, but they're adjustable wrenches. Or you can put a big piece of metal pipe in here, or a big heavy screwdriver, and turn this. What I'm going to do is use this wrench, and I'm going to turn this and hold this at the same time, and I'll show you what I mean. So just taking this wrench, I'm going to put it in here. Might have to adjust it here a little bit to fit. I want it nice and snug. And now what I'm going to do is just turn this like I'm going to loosen it. There you go. You can see it broke free. And now I can rotate and unthread that lower tube from this nut. And you can see the threads right here starting to show up. It's a fine thread. And you can see right there, I can slide this right off. And you can see the threads right there. It's a little awkward for me. I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera. But you can see how that's put together. So again, you may find it easier to protect this from the jaws. Do a good job protecting this. You can use pieces of inner tube, you can use duct tape, you can use masking tape, you can do whatever works for you. Again, I could have used a big heavy screwdriver in that hole. I just used this adjustable pliers, and then once you break it free, it'll spin out. Now, you can use heat. If you're going to use heat, obviously you have to be careful with this duct tape because you'll melt it. I did not use any heat here at all, and as you can see, it broke apart quite freely. That's a relative statement, of course, but I'll do the same thing on the other tube here shortly, and then I will be able to, after I clean this lower tube right here, I clean this and get all the oil out of it. This will be ready to go off to the chromer, as well as the other one when I complete the disassembly. Now the fork seal is inside of here, so let's take a look at that. This outer tube in this case just slides right off like that. It'll slide right off the end. And you can see the seal is right there. There's no retainer, there's no circlip, there's no C-clip, E-clip holding this seal in. That's just pressed into the bore here. Let's go ahead and see if we can't get this out. So let's examine this outer nut a little bit more closely. You can see the seal right there. That's what we're going to try to get out. You can also see that this outer nut has been already deformed a bit right here. Imagine what happened is the bike has been dropped and it's been pushed in. I'm not going to do anything about that at this point. I'm just going to leave it alone. On the inside, you can clearly see the threads, and there's also an O-ring. Let me get a flashlight here. I don't know if you can see that O-ring right down there. It's black. So that will be replaced also eventually, that O-ring. The standard practice or method that a lot of people would use to get this O-ring out would be to hook a seal puller underneath the lip of that seal and then leverage it out. I'm not going to use that approach because of the thickness, the fine cross-section of this part of the nut right here, or outer tube. it's pretty fine. And what I don't want to do is get something in here like this and pry against this. It might work, but I'm concerned about damaging it even more. And you can see a little abrasion right there. Now, I'm not attempting to preserve this seal. In fact, I already have new seals for this, new Suzuki OEM seals. You can still buy them. What I'm going to do is drive it out from the opposite side, from this side, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I went through my socket inventory and found a socket. This happens to be a 7/8. This is a very, very old socket. It's probably an antique. I wouldn't be surprised if this socket doesn't date to the 1940s. I inherited it from my uncle when he passed away many years ago. Anyway, this socket just nicely fits down inside of there. I don't know if you can see it, against the back side of that seal. And that's exactly what I want. I want it just to fit through here and bear on the back side of that socket. Like that. And then I just took, that's a 1/2-inch drive impact extension that happens to fit that socket. Then, or now, I'm going to place this upside down, as you can see right here, on this piece of MDF. I wanted something nice and soft, but still resilient enough so that, because I'm going to hit here and drive that seal out that way, so then I can just easily remove it, as opposed to trying to lever it out. I'm not going to use heat again. I could take this black duct tape off pretty easily, and I could heat that if I wanted to. I'm leaving the duct tape on now just to protect the part right now. Again, is that absolutely necessary? Probably not, but I'm going to do it, just leave it on for now. I don't know as I'm going to need heat. And I'm going to just smack the end of this right here, this extension, with this brass mallet, and drive that seal out. I've got my safety glasses on. Let's see how this goes. And you can see the seal is moving right here. And there's the seal. A little deformed, but it came out nonetheless. Again, I'm not trying to preserve that. What I'm trying to preserve is this. As you can see, this socket just nicely fits through there, like that. So there's no damage on the inside. It's nice and smooth yet. I know you can't see that very well, but just fits. So we got the seal out, and when this comes back from the chrome, or both of them, I'll have to do the same thing, of course, to the other shock there, or fork too. When these come back from the chromer, then I'll put the new seals in. I can't do that obviously at this point because this has to go through the chrome process, and then I will replace that O-ring that's on the inside there. So that's it for this video today, folks, talking about the chrome, the rechroming, and a little demonstration of how to get a seal out. Again, there's other ways that could probably be done. I could have probably put this in a press, in my press, and rigged up some means to press it out with a shop press, but I didn't think that'd probably be necessary. It came out reasonably easy. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.